It's extraordinary. We've never heard of this. It could have happened in secret that we wouldn't have known about. But to take your career into your own hands and complain about the President of the United States is an extraordinary act. And in the statute itself, it says that this can't just be a policy disagreement where you disagree that, maybe Putin should not be invited back into the G7. This has to be an issue of urgent concern to the national security of the United States.
Right, and I want to make, two points. One is I believe this whistleblower didn't make this complaint with an eye toward it ever becoming public. The whistleblower did not expect that this would ever erupt into this maelstrom, and likely is not eager to ever have their identity be disclosed. Understanding is the whistleblower really just felt this was their duty. They were following instructions, following the statute by taking this concern to the ICIG, and then hope that the process would take its course, and let whoever needs to be held accountable be held accountable. This whistleblower did indeed feel there was enough of a concern that the Inspector General should look into it, and the IG, as Ken noted, did deem this complaint to be credible and found that it was something that met the definition of an intelligence activity and something that needed to be raised. In fact, the IG then took this complaint to the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, which he was supposed to do by statute. And at that point, the DNI was supposed to, within 7 days, send that complaint to the Hill, to the Congressional Intelligence Committees. And that's where the process got stuck. And that's why we're in the situation we are today, with Atkinson testifying on the Hill.
Because he turned it over to the Justice Department to give him legal guidance, and that became
well, no, because
he consulted the Justice Department.
The DNI, Joseph Maguire, instead went to or it might have been the White House, who advised Maguire to go to the OLC, the Justice Department, and get an opinion. Atkinson, the IG, I don't believe went to the Justice Department. Atkinson works for Maguire, and Atkinson was not authorized by law to divulge the complaint to the congressional committees on his own, and I think his hands are tied there. And to a certain extent, I think Maguire feels his hands were tied, that he has, as we reported, raised concerns about this issue with both the Justice Department and the White House. He's not doing what he's doing, willingly.
Understood. And this all happened before he even came into office. To the president saying, "Does anyone think I'm dumb enough to say something sensitive?" When I know people are listening, I just want to show everyone what happened at the border wall. This was a very political photo opportunity to try to show people that there is a wall being built, even though it's a repair of a wall that was already there. But in any case, this is what he said, and this is how he was challenged by the Border Patrol officer who is right there. Take a look.
One thing we haven't mentioned is technology. They're wired so that we will know if somebody's trying to break through, and you may want to discuss that a little bit, General.
Sir, there could be some merit in not discussing that.
Okay? I like that. That was a great answer.
So clearly Ken Delaney, the president, was talking about something sensitive, which is how they are monitoring possible breaches of the wall. And that's not something that he should have been talking about in public.
And Andrew, you and I have both been cautioned by former officials that it's possible this whistleblower is misinterpreting something they overheard. But look, these folks are sophisticated people inside the White House, and they may see things they disagree with. They're career staffers, as Ned knows. It's not their job to complain when they disagree or they think the president's doing something stupid. It's only an issue when they see that national security is implicated, intelligence matters are being improperly disclosed. They know the definition of that, and clearly they were concerned enough to file a written complaint.
Ken Delaney and Ned, we yet to see whether or not the congressional oversight will work as the whistleblower law says it should. Thank you very much. To be continued. Ned Price, Ellen Nakashima, thank you so very much for all of your reporting and for taking the time today. We know how busy you are, and Ken Delaney as well. Meanwhile, catastrophic flooding in eastern Texas. prompting evacuation orders for thousands of residents. Tropical depression Imelda now slamming the coastline the past 2 days, already dumping several feet of rain in some cities. Authorities now say significant and life-threatening flash flooding could stretch across to western Louisiana as well. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez is in Hampshire, Texas. Gabe, this is a terribly dangerous, threatening situation.
Absolutely, Andrea. The rain just won't stop. Now, right here, ongoing water rescues are underway, and just so I can show you where we are, this is an intersection pretty much surrounded at this point almost entirely by water. We just saw a rescue boat bring a man from that neighborhood. He said that he had water up to his chest. We also saw another family being brought out earlier as well. Now, this road is just off I-10, 73 here in Chambers County. If you look at all those cars behind me, they got stuck in all this overnight. It was really incredible to see how many cars decided, some abandoned their vehicles, others are still waiting for any way to get out. And Joe, if we can come over here and look how much water, Andrea, extends all the way in that direction. We just saw another airboat come and rescue more people from over there. It's really an incredible scene here in Chambers County. Authorities said that they've got more than 1,000 calls for rescue overnight. There was a hospital that had to be evacuated. Several patients were rushed to a nearby nursing home, and this is an ongoing situation. We have been seeing rain here pretty much throughout the morning. Thankfully, the lightning has let up. Some of the more severe weather has let up, but this is now at this point a steady rain, and more rain is forecast throughout the evening. There's a lot of concern here, for example, in Beaumont, that has gotten 30 inches or so of rain. That's approaching Hurricane Harvey levels, Andrea. And indeed, some of the residents that we have spoken here, they were hit hard by Harvey. But they say in this particular location, it was worse than that. Andrea?
Gutierrez, my gosh, what a terrible situation there. Thank you so much for that report. Meanwhile, tensions with Tehran, Iran threatening all-out war in the event of U.S. military retaliation. And later, controversy in Canada, the re-election campaign of Prime Minister Justin
Same effective.
Spokesperson, this is a paid advertisement for legal services sponsored by Nightline Legal. Cases assigned on a random basis to participating law firms. See disclaimer for law firms. If you or a loved one were exposed to Roundup weed killer and were later diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, call right now. Call 1-800-873-3110.
Every child deserves a future. That's why we do whatever it takes to ensure children grow up healthy, learning, and safe, just as we have for nearly 100 years. Join us.
Gone today. Raging fires, violent storms, the hottest summer on record. Climate change is an immediate threat. Join Chris Hayes and team for a detailed look at our most urgent issue, including an exclusive interview with Al Gore, one of the first to sound the alarm.
We still retain the ability to avoid the truly catastrophic civilization were we not to act.
All in with Chris Hayes, Climate in Crisis, tonight and tomorrow at 8 on MSNBC.
I want to say something. I want to weigh in on this particular program. Not just about the wording towards whatever the President of the United States had to say to some other leader in another country that was considered inappropriate, or whatever word that you want to categorize it in. But I also want to comment on the climate regiment that we are dealing with pertaining to all these different changes. Right now, we're having catastrophic flooding down in the Houston, Texas area, in which I was down that way. I believe it was in 2004, maybe either 2013 or 2014. I was down in that area before I decided to go to Homestead, Florida, to finish out the remaining winter down there. But while I was over in, I done forgot now the name of the town. It's a historical little town right there off of the Gulf of and all of a sudden the bottom just fell out of it to the point that they received, I believe it was 6 or 8 inches of rain in less than about a 2 to 3 hour period. And I had never experienced that type of rainfall to just drop literally out of the sky. But it's the only time that I have ever driven as many miles as I have driven across country in my truck and pulling my enclosed trailer. It's the only time that I had to go through waters that exceeded the level of the bottom part of my trailer. And my trailer is fairly high. It's probably, I don't know, give or take around a foot, 14 inches, maybe 16 inches high. But I remember going over into the Louisiana area, having to basically unlock all my doors and let the unit down as far as opening up the doors for air, just to be able to dry out everything that had gotten wet that was either on the floor or close to being on the floor, including the floor, because the floor of that enclosed trailer is thick plywood. I think it's 3/4 inch, maybe an inch plywood, and it actually warped part of the flooring in that trailer. Of course, after the period of months and years, it has all dried out by now. Hopefully I caught it quick enough that it didn't rot in none of it. But it was the only time that I have ever seen the sky literally open up to the point that it didn't matter in what direction that I was going on. It was kind of like an island down there below Houston, Texas. I should know the name of the town because it's a very historical town, and they got clobbered with a hurricane back years and years ago. I don't forgot the name, Hugo or something like that, back years ago. San Antonio, maybe San Antonio, Texas, I don't know, but it was down below Houston. But I had never seen the water, the sky open up that way. What they're experiencing right now, in the same sense, is the same type of flooding that they have received again and again and again. Once more, we keep repeating to the experts, we keep repeating to people like Donald Trump, that these are abnormal conditions that routinely used to only occur once every 100 years or once every 500 years. And now we're seeing these occurrences continue to keep happening. Just like in this particular area this spring, it was very, very unusually wet. Abnormally wet, to the point that it caused the mighty Mississippi to run full at its banks for approximately 5 months. It broke all kinds of historical records that has ever been historically noted pertaining to the mighty Mississippi, pertaining to the flooding of it. That in and of itself caused billions and billions of dollars of damage pertaining to the agriculture communities, as well as the flooding of various towns, various communities, etc., etc., etc. Just like this particular storm that's coming up through Houston right now will be a $1 billion catastrophe, disaster. Who's paying for these disasters? The American taxpayer is paying for these disasters, because once it exceeds a certain amount of money, the insurance companies climb on board towards crying help, 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 SOS, SOS, and ultimately it's not the insurance companies that pay for these disasters, but it's the taxpayers that pay for these disasters. Keep in mind that one man's loss is another man's gain. During the events of all the rain, those farmers around in this particular area, as well as parts of Kentucky, Indiana, up through other parts of Alabama and Mississippi, received the blessings of all the abundant rain, to the point that these farmers around here have obtained greater yield productions than they have ever received. Do you see any of the agriculture farmers around here helping those that had catastrophes in their life to the point that either those that planted next to the bottomlands either got flooded or wasn't even able to put in a corn or a bean crop? Do you see any of those running to their rescue? No, you do not. That's the reason why I say that the system in and of itself is fraudulent. Because whenever you have one group of people that's suffering, why another group of people is abundantly getting all sorts of exceeding record-breaking profits, there's nothing fair about that. Now, on the other hand, let's look at something else that a lot of your weather people don't explain to the general public. Whenever you have this type of spraying that has caused not only great agriculture producing farmers of being able to have record-breaking crops, but you also have more vegetation. When you have more vegetation, you have more bugs, you have more mosquitoes, you have more insects, okay? But you also have more vegetation. For the past 23 days, we have not received one drop of rain that was recognizable in the Paducah, Kentucky weather registering, weather, whatever you want to call it. That means we are setting ourselves up with all the vegetation towards massive fire seasons this fall if the weather does not change, if we do not see exceeding rains come into the area similar towards what happened up in the Ozark Mountains and also up into the Smoky Mountains, not the Ozark Mountains, excuse me, but the Rocky Mountains pertaining to the Appalachian Mountains whenever all the burns took place up around Pigeon Forge and Dollywood and up towards Gatlinburg. We are setting ourselves up once more in parts of Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and other parts of the Appalachian Mountains towards massive fire seasons this fall. Similar towards what set itself up out in California, we believe it was last year or the year before, whenever they had exceeding fires. That was the point that I'm trying to make here is this: we are seeing extremes pertaining to the environmental changes that are happening, not just here in America, but throughout the planet. And unless we have smart enough people to identify these changes and to act upon to these changes, we as a society may very well turn this planet into an uninhabitable planet, to the point that not only can the human Homo sapiens not being able to live upon to the planet, but also creatures and fowl and etc. We are going through extreme changes pertaining to these environmental changes that, once more, the people in the state of Tennessee ignored whenever Al Gore first brought it to the American people's attention back in the early 90s whenever he was running for president. They ignored the warnings, they ignored the advisories, they ignored the wisdom coming from people that could see the changes coming, and now it has put us 30 years later basically where we are now, or approximately 30 years later to where we are now. These abrupt, sudden changes, from flooding to famines to extreme hurricanes that recently destroyed not just Puerto Rico, but also other parts of the islands, is all biblical Bible prophecy coming true that Jesus talked about that would in fact occur in the last days. That would in fact occur in the last days. Not because of God the Father, but because of man. Man is the one that is doing this. They are doing this to not only the earth, but they are doing this to the atmosphere that surrounds the earth. They are doing this in the sense of ignoring the commandments of God and going their trialing ways to the point that now not only is and are the guilty suffering, but now also the innocent is suffering. So humanity, the Homo sapien race, has no one to blame for all these extreme weather pattern changes pertaining to environmental changes other than themselves. Please, let's listen to this report.
Iran is escalating its war of words today after the Secretary of State called the bombing of the Saudi oil refineries an act of war. The foreign minister, Zarif, saying that his country is prepared for the worst.
What would be the consequence of an American or Saudi military strike on Iran now?
An all-out war. I'm making a very serious statement that we don't want war. We don't want to engage in a military confrontation. We won't blink to defend our territory.
Secretary of State Pompeo in Abu Dhabi today saying that diplomacy is still their policy.
There is an enormous consensus in the region that we know precisely who conducted these attacks was Iran. We are still striving to build out a coalition. I was here in an act of diplomacy while the foreign minister of Iran is threatening all-out war and to fight to the last American. We're here to build out a coalition aimed at achieving peace and a peaceful resolution of this. That's my mission set. It's what President Trump certainly wants me to work to achieve. And I hope that the Islamic Republic of Iran sees it the same way.
Joining me now, NBC White House correspondent Kristen Welker, Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press, and an MSNBC political analyst, and retired four-star U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey, an NBC military analyst. Welcome all. Kristen, there were some lower-level national security meetings today to come up with more options. They're talking about sanctions. There'll be a full National Security Council meeting with the president tomorrow, as we understand it. And what Pompeo, who's flying back now, is talking about is assembling a coalition, presenting the evidence against Iran as they see it to the United Nations next week. What more do we know?
Well, we know that the Pentagon continues to prepare military actions for President Trump, including measured military strikes. But this is a president, Andrea, who, despite tweeting out that the United States is locked and loaded, is really showing no willingness to take a military action against Iran. He's sort of been tamping down the rhetoric, if you will, in the days since he tweeted that. And as we know, this is a president who has an America First foreign policy, who's really walked up to the brink of military action in the past and then walked back from it, including a recent provocation by Iran when it struck down an unmanned U.S. drone in June. You'll recall that President Trump was getting pressure from some of his top advisors, then National Security Advisor John Bolton, to retaliate. President Trump saying that he didn't feel as though a military retaliation was the appropriate course of action. So, as you point out, President Trump will get briefed tomorrow during that full National Security Council meeting, and then he heads to the UN next week, and that is when the United States is really going to seek to build a coalition in terms of its response, which already includes sanctions. The question is, what, if any, further action does the United States want to take, Andrea?
And General McCaffrey, when we talk to military leaders such as yourself, retired military, Admiral McCraven was here yesterday saying Iran does not want war, the Saudis don't want war, and the U.S. does not want war, because war with Iran would be could be catastrophic, and the Saudis would be vulnerable. They clearly were not able to defend, even with their Patriot missile batteries, to even spot these incoming low-flying cruise missiles and drones against their oil refineries.
Yeah, well, it's a very complex situation. One thing we got to keep in mind: the Iranians are very tough people. You know, they fought the Iraqis for 8 years. There were 500,000 killed on each side. Right now, they're in a box, and economic constraints are strangling them. They think they've got to act. I don't believe they're going to cave in public to U.S. demands. And so we're in a position where Saudi Arabia, you're right, just suffered the equivalent of a Pearl Harbor attack. Knocked out half their production with a fairly cheap, modest cruise missile RPV attack on them. So where's it all going to go? The Republican Revolutionary Guards may want war. They may think the confrontation's worth it. So we're in a difficult situation. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, U.S. Navy, and U.S. Air Force air power in the region can use standoff weapons to devastate the Iranians, their submarines, their aircraft, the air defense system. But in the process, it's likely that would turn into a very intense regional war. No one seems to think that that's a good outcome, certainly to include Mr. Trump.
And we understand that there is a recommendation from General McKenzie for more troops into the region. Obviously, some of them would be sea-based as well. Jonathan Lemire, we have a new national security advisor who is probably chairing a meeting today on some of these options to present to the president tomorrow. He is Robert O'Brien, as you well know, a former hostage negotiator, a lawyer, without a whole range of foreign policy experience, but apparently well-liked, and certainly a big contrast with John Bolton, who's also made some very controversial comments against the president.
Right. The new national security advisor, first of all, has the full support of Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, and Pompeo has certainly consolidated his power in sort of the foreign policy apparatus of this administration. O'Brien is seen as a much sort of smoother operator than Bolton. There's this expectation he'll be much more diplomatic behind closed doors with the president, but he and Bolton are see eye to eye on a lot of topics and are perhaps more hawkish than the president right now, who is in a little bit of a bind here. As we're just discussing, he is someone who time after time uses bellicose rhetoric and really threatens American adversaries across the world, but doesn't seem to want to follow through. He's someone with very, very few pieces of fixed ideology, this president. But one of them is a real commitment to not be involved in be entangled in lengthy military overseas conflicts. I mean, though he briefly did support the Iraq War, he became one of its most vocal critics. He campaigned on the idea of ending American involvement in both Iraq and Afghanistan. We've seen him here, whether it's Iran previously or North Korea or other places, not wanting to commit, not wanting to get into that shooting war. But the issue is he may be painting himself a bit of a corner. At a certain point, you have to back up that talk. Or if not, observers wonder, would American adversaries be emboldened and want to push the envelope further? And we're seeing some real scattershot messages here from the White House in recent days. You know, Pompeo, of course, is declaring this an act of war, seems to be toeing right up the line of conflict, while the president hedging his bets. And we're, according to our reporting, he in part, first of all, he has no problem undermining his subordinates, but more than that, he likes the idea of sowing confusion and doubt in global capitals, thinking that keeps Iran, in this case, off balance.
But that can be very dangerous as well. Accidents can happen. Barry McCaffrey, Kristen Welker, Jonathan Lemire, thank you all so very much. And coming up, Trudeau in trouble. The Canadian Prime Minister apologizing for darkening his skin as part of a costume for a 2001 gala. Will he survive his upcoming re-election? It's next month. This is Andrea Mitchell Reports on MSNBC.
I'm going to be asking Canadians to forgive me for what I did.
Well, there you go. That's going to end this particular session on my recording here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Obviously, we had problems on every front. If it's not environmental problems, it's financial, economical problems. If it's not financial, economical problems, it's illegal aliens pertaining to aborting their country and coming over here from a major war that is brewing over in the Middle East, to greedy, selfish people that has put us in this particular position that we're in pertaining to corrupt politicians. We have problems now on every front, and I guarantee you, Honda, Nissan, Mazda, or any other foreign entity that we're aware of will not bail us out, will not turn the tides. It is going to take we, the people, the godly people that know the difference between right and wrong and are willing to do exactly what is right and not what is wrong. This has reached a devastating, severe entanglement of political affairs. Okay? Follow what I'm saying. From a climate in crisis to people that we know assassinated an American journalist that to this day I still believe had something to do with masterminding 9/11. So we are in a very, very complex situation that could elevate into this right here. And you have to ask yourself a question, because the Americans have already spent $7 trillion on Islamic radicalism over in the Middle East, can we afford to go back to a war that we know has no beginning and has no end? Or it appears that way as of now. Or, better than that, the true $64,000 question pertaining to Mr. Pompeo, or however you pronounce his name, Pompeo, Pompeo, P-O-M-P-E, Pompeo, P-O-M, P-A-L-O-M-A maybe? I don't know, Pompeo. But anyways, can we afford not to pay attention to the signs that's going on pertaining to the Middle East in regard to holding our ground, holding our own? Can we afford not to get engaged in what is happening? Because it's very obvious that the Iranians are feeling the effects of the orders that has been initiated by the American government as far as bringing sanctions up onto their country. Obama got involved in something here that he never should have gotten involved in towards promising these people nuclear energy or nuclear whatever, and now we are feeling the consequences of it. And believe it or not, I don't think that we've even scraped the bottom of the top of the surface yet towards just exactly where all this is heading to. I really don't. These are very, very serious times that we're living in right now. And people need to pay very, very close attention to what is going on the home front. Because it's serious. This could actually be the existence towards rather not America lives in the future towards a prosperity nation, or rather not America falls, similar towards how Rome fell, because we didn't have all our ducks in a row. We didn't have all our alliances gathered up together in knowing the proper moves to make. So this has become a very, very strategic, critical time that America is living in right now in 2019, the latter part of September. So if there's ever been a time that we needed to pray for unity, pray for the right decisions, pray for the right leadership, pray that God does somehow or another spare us from the initial blows that we have brought upon to ourselves pertaining to the climate crisis here, not only in America but throughout the world. But if there's ever been a time that we needed to pray to God the Father for good, strong leadership and unity, I truly believe that it is of today. Thanks again to my viewers for listening to what I had to say. You know, I'm just a simple man trying to live a simple life, raised up in a simple part of the country here in West Tennessee. I had no idea that God was going to call me towards being selected or elected towards being a spokesman for these type of situations. I had no idea that I was going to have to fulfill my patriotic commitments, my duties to not only my neighborhood but also to my country. But so be it. If this is the burden that God has placed upon my life for me to exchange these ideals in trying to better society, especially better America, in the way that we need to go, then so be it. Then I'll be a spokesman for God and for the people. But it's not something that I solely elected myself to be a part of. It is something that God has elected me to be a part of. So please, please, for the future of our children and our children's children, for the future of this country, please pay very close attention to what these segments that I'm putting out, the Windmill Ministries, are putting out to the general public. Thanks again, and shalom, and thank you for your support. God bless, and good luck to all of us.